Well, let's begin with the slush fund. The swamp is not being drained, and there's more slush in it than ever before. So Trump was meeting yesterday with Mike Johnson to talk about how this is completely derailing the GOP. How many more things can Trump do? And I guess perhaps there is a limit to how much they can manipulate the elections with the gerrymandering and things like that, because he already has most of America against him on this Iran war. Now he's engaged in the most open corruption we have ever seen, I've ever seen in my lifetime. And so the two of them are getting together to talk about this because this has frozen their desire to get more funding from ICE and Border Patrol. It is basically freezing everything, and it's going to freeze them out of the leadership in Congress as well. Well, the fund has been temporarily blocked by a federal judge from awarding payouts, and another one is actually investigating, after 35 judges have pushed for this, actually investigating the inherent corruption in all of this, and the corruption in what Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche has done. Acting is the appropriate word, I think, here. Anyway, Trump has continued to support it, the slush fund, creating a headache for GOP lawmakers, trying to get a reconciliation bill passed and also trying to get reelected. Johnson and Trump met yesterday morning on the weaponization fund. It has completely screwed up passing reconciliation, ICE funding, and other issues for the GOP voters. But Reason had an excellent article about how corrupt this settlement is. It's not just one, but it's two judicial roadblocks, two judges in two very different areas. One of them, the Eastern District of Virginia, the judge temporarily barred the Justice Department from allocating any money to this nearly $2 billion fund. The other one is in Southern District of Florida. Judge Williams there closed Trump's case on May 18th after he dropped his lawsuit. But she ordered a briefing on the question of whether or not the settlement was, quote, a product of collusion and a fraud on the court. Well, absolutely it was. As a matter of fact, 35 former federal judges that have been appointed to positions by presidents of both major parties filed a motion with her. They urged her to reopen the Trump versus the IRS because the purported settlement, they said, which was never submitted to her for review, raises profound questions about the party's candor towards the court and manipulation of the judicial system. And this is what Trump is boasting about. He says, hey, I'm basically suing myself, and I can just award this money to myself. It's a crazy thing. It's like, yeah, it really is, especially when you're so stupid you would even say that out loud. Williams thought these questions were worth exploring. She said a court is empowered to investigate serious misconduct as a collateral issue within the purview of Rule 11 and to determine whether or not an attorney has abused the judicial process. Rule 11 aims to deter baseless filings. It authorizes sanctions against attorneys who file claims that are legally frivolous and unsupported by evidence or driven by an improper purpose. I think maybe the Attorney General needs to be disbarred. That's the situation we have here in America right now. Under that rule, attorneys who submit complaints, briefs, or motions are required to certify that the filing is not presented for any improper purpose. A party's decision to file a frivolous lawsuit for the sole purpose of forcing a settlement may qualify as such an improper purpose, said the judge. Even worse, this is just a pretext for awarding himself cash. You talk about fraud. It was fraud on steroids. They point to the fact that the settlement in question includes a 3-paragraph addendum that purports to bar the United States from pursuing claims that could have been otherwise asserted against the Trump family. That's the statement that was added later on by so-called Attorney General Todd Blanche to say that they have immunity to any issues that the IRS might have with the Trump family, which basically gets them off the hook for about $100 million worth of payments and fines and things like that. So it highlights the fact that the defendants did not even try to defend against plaintiffs' claims despite their active opposition to nearly identical claims and other litigation. So what they're saying is the Department of Justice actively opposes claims like this and other litigation, but they didn't defend against this because essentially his boss was also the plaintiff. The former judges also assert that plaintiffs' claims were clearly untimely, therefore untenable. As a matter of fact, under federal law, we had not talked about this before, plaintiffs have to file such claims within 2 years of learning about unauthorized disclosure of their tax information. Trump clearly missed that deadline. And I guess the Attorney General clearly missed the fact that he missed the deadline too, right? Because it has been more than 2 years since the guy who leaked the information was not found guilty, but he pleaded guilty. And so they knew about it before he pleaded guilty, but he pleaded guilty more than 2 years ago. So they missed the deadline. Trump's lawsuit averred that the IRS contractor had inflicted at least $10 billion in damages. Where does that number come from? That was the other thing, right? And I've pointed out so many times, he files a $10 billion lawsuit against all these different media organizations, the Wall Street Journal, the BBC, many others, and then he settles for other. It's just a number that he throws out there. It has absolutely no basis. It is totally frivolous. The basis of his lawsuits are frivolous. The amount that he is suing for is frivolous. I said the complaint did not make any attempt to back up that $10 billion in damages number, which by some strange coincidence is exactly the same as Trump's estimate of damages in several other lawsuits involving distinctly different claims. He just sues everybody for $10 billion. It's just so obvious what a fraud and a liar he is. They also argued that the IRS should not be held responsible for the conduct of someone who was employed by a private contractor. This guy who did it was working for the consulting firm Booz Allen Hamilton at the time. The government's lawyers did not try any of the defenses suggested by the IRS. In fact, they never even officially responded to Trump's claims at all. In other words, they didn't respond to the lawsuit. They didn't try to defend anything. The IRS was saying, well, here's how we would defend against this. The Department of Justice did none of that. A failure that highlights the egregious conflicts of interest created by this lawsuit. I'm supposed to work out a settlement with myself, Trump acknowledged a few days before he sued the IRS. And he has already awarded himself money and damages and other issues as well. That bizarre situation prompted Judge Williams to question whether the case involved a genuine controversy between adverse parties, as is required for a lawsuit to proceed. And that's something several judges, including Judge Napolitano, pointed out. He said, first of all, in a lawsuit, you have to have an adversarial situation. You can't be both plaintiff and defendant. That is total nonsense, like everything else in the Trump administration. In addition to an apology from the IRS, Trump got $1.8 billion for purported victims of lawfare and weaponization. And again, don't get caught up with this head fake. Bringing in the J6 people, as I said, was simply to try to appeal to his base, who he knew were going to see that this was fraud. Everybody was going to see that it was fraud. But he could pull them in with this tribal stuff, right? And yet the reality is that this is really about him. It's not about the J6 people. And both his enemies and his friends are doing us all a disservice by pointing out that. As a matter of fact, one of the things they said is that settlements like this are prohibited by another rule. In other words, you can't, if there's an action, a lawsuit or something like that, you cannot award money to somebody that is not involved in that at all. And as I said from the very beginning, this is all about Trump personally and his IRS disputes. It's highly unusual for the Justice Department to settle a lawsuit by agreeing to pay people whose grievances are completely unrelated to the plaintiff's claims. Such settlements, in fact, are prohibited by a rule that the Justice Department issued during Trump's first term. That rule, which Pam Bondi, then the Attorney General, reaffirmed in February of 2025. And it bars settlement payments to a, quote, non-governmental person or entity that is not a party to the dispute. That's exactly what's going on with the J6 people. In case the payoffs to Trump's allies were not corrupt enough, Todd Blanche revealed on May 19th, he put in his extra addition there, protecting them from any disputes with the IRS, saving the Trump crime family $100 million or more. When Trump dropped his case, neither his personal attorneys for the Justice Department's lawyers, who also work for him, neither of these people who work for him informed the judge that they had dropped the case. So she said, there was no settlement of record. They never sent me a thing saying, yeah, we settled this and here's what we did. The Justice Department neither submitted any settlement documents nor filed any documents ensuring that the settlement was appropriate, where there was an outstanding question as to whether an actual case or controversy existed. Here's the bottom line, folks. Trump is not careful with the details. He doesn't care. He feels like he can do anything he wants. He has become so arrogant, so filled with hubris, he doesn't even bother to try to lie to us. He doesn't even bother to try to war game this out and come up with some kind of a plausible explanation. He just does whatever he wants. That is going to be his downfall. Williams was deceived, the former federal judges said in their motion, 35 of them, by the way. Neither the plaintiffs nor the defendants said anything about a settlement in court. The Justice Department publicly announced a settlement of this action shortly after the plaintiffs filed their dismissal. There was never an adversarial proceeding over which the court even had jurisdiction, says the motion, from 35 former federal judges appointed by both Republican and Democrat administrations. This is truly amazing. And yet we've got even more Republicans moving back against this. You got Lindsey Graham even saying, hey, you need to get rid of this. This is a hot potato that's going to really bounce back against you. And we have a very conservative Republican. Her name is Kat Kamek. I don't know anything about her except that I've seen people say she's very, very conservative. Her husband is a first responder. He is someone who is a medic for a SWAT team. And she is highly offended by the idea that some J6 people could get money out of this.
Well, as someone who served on the weaponization committee last Congress, I can tell you that the issue is very real and it is rampant. But I'm not sure that a $1 billion-plus slush fund is the answer. I think if you really want to eliminate the weaponization that takes place within the federal government against American citizens and those that serve, you need to actually address the root cause. This is the problem that we have in Washington. It's the idea of throwing money at a problem and hoping it goes away. I think that money could be better spent in bringing down the cost of everything and making life more affordable for Americans while simultaneously addressing the system that allowed for the weaponization against individuals here in this country. And certainly I will say, as the wife of a first responder, absolutely under no circumstances would I ever support any payouts for anyone who ever assaulted law enforcement.
All right. Well,
yeah, somebody said, well, if you lose her, she's one of the more conservative members, you've lost pretty much the GOP. As a matter of fact, Lindsey Graham, even as I said, he's urging Trump to stop this before it's too late. She said, you need to actually address the root causes. And I said this before Trump took office, after he got elected. I said, yeah, this weaponization stuff that Biden did is really bad, rather than saying, well, Biden did it, so I can do it. I can take it to the next level, which is what they both do. We just up the ante each time. And it is creating a downward spiral as we all go down the drain. Every time you hear these people on the Republican side, whenever Trump does anything criminal, they say, well, Biden did it. Well, Biden did it. So that gives us an excuse. That's not how it works. We have a constitution. We have a rule of law. And these are things that need to be bolstered, need to be enforced, need to be strengthened if necessary to stop this kind of. That's called reform. They don't want any reform. Trump wants personal power. He wants personal political power, and he wants money. And that's what this is ultimately about. He is not going to reform anything. If he leaves it corrupt the way that it is, and if he grabs the corruption that Biden put in and adds to it to make himself more powerful, what that does is that is Trump making himself personally more powerful, personally more feared, rather than making the government better. He's making the government worse in order to do that. And so then you have Mike Pence, who goes on, and he talks about this slush fund on Sunday. And boy, MAGA comes out against Pence. They really hate him. Pence said he's deeply offended that some of this money could be going to people who had attacked the police. And again, both Trump's friends and enemies, both the people who are in either side of this, they all understand the corruption involved in it. And they're all going back to the J6 situation. You heard even Kat Kamick say that. Her husband, a medic for a SWAT team, as well as a firefighter. So she said, I can't support that. Well, they didn't come after her, but they came after Pence for that. And this outlet here, which is the Independent Sentinel, said you can have logical disagreement about the slush fund. Logical disagreement? How about the fact that it is an illegal fraud upon the court and the American people? Could we say that? Could we agree that that's what it is? Because that's clearly the case. He's violated every aspect of lawsuits, of court procedures, of Rule 11, of statute of limitations. Everything has just been thrown out. And what we have are fiats and dictates from his little minions, like Todd Blanche. Could we say that about it? No, you don't say that. But he said Pence said that the fund was to provide compensation for people who attacked the police. Well, he's just lying. And, quite frankly, that is not the truth. The truth is this is really going to the Trump crime family. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at davidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. davidknightshow.com.